It's me. Now, a while back, I made a video talking about what to do and what not to do if you want to get into game collecting. And that actually happened to be one of the best performing videos on this channel. This channel has almost no subscribers. That video has more views than the town I grew up in has people. That's pretty crazy. But today I wanted to do a companion video to that and basically talk about what to do with your collection other than just buying more games. Also, if you're wondering why I'm wearing a sports shirt and not a normal game shirt or metal band or, you know, anime tie-in shirt like I normally would, it's because I know jocks. I lead a varied life. Don't judge me. Don't fucking do it. But no. Today I want to talk about, it's very easy for a lot of people to try and collect for a specific console. Say you want to get every game for the NES library. A million people have done that. Or let's say you want to get every game in the Zelda or Castlevania franchises. I personally have done that. These are things that are common with collectors. And there's nothing wrong with doing those things. Like I said, I've done that. It's fine to do. But what I think is more interesting and something I want to recommend today is to go after some of the more conversational and more unique ephemera surrounding gaming. It's not super unheard of to find someone with the Zelda CDI games, or a Panasonic Q, or a copy of Earthbound in box. These things exist out there. You can see them in a lot of collections if you know serious collectors. So my recommendation would be to do something more unique, and I guess I should be more specific, and I'll start with something that kind of, hits the literal meaning of ephemera. So for you 20 and unders in the audience, a magazine is like a book, but thinner, taller, and wider, and they're usually targeted to a specific subject or audience or demographic. And I guess I should back up. A book is this thing.
2 hours later.
Hieroglyphics, and now you understand the origins of the written word, and we can get back on topic. There are several types of magazines that people would generally want to collect. The first would be like a company-specific magazine. These would be something like your Nintendo Power, your Xbox magazine, or in this instance, Atari Explorer. These are usually published by or in partnership with the game company that they're about. These will generally talk about specifically what that company is doing, some first-party games that they have coming up. Oftentimes there will be interviews with some of the developers, creators, maybe even some of the executives or heads of the company. They generally give you a very in-depth idea of what that company is doing currently in the industry. And these are generally sought after for people that are like fans of a specific console. Nintendo Powers would often be seen by people that were huge Nintendo fanboys back in the second wave of the console wars when it was, you had to pick Nintendo or Sega. Nowadays, you wouldn't get this as much because the console wars are kind of irrelevant. But back then, it was a big thing, and so these magazines were really sought after by those people. My next example of magazines, and I wish I balanced this better so it wouldn't spin on its own, would be the third-party ones. These would be things like your Electronic Gaming Monthly or your Game Informer. These are things where they would cover the game industry as a whole. So they wouldn't always have the same level of access to an individual company, but you would get a much broader idea of what's coming down the gaming pipeline. These magazines mostly focused on new and upcoming releases. So while they wouldn't go in depth, you generally wouldn't get like mini walkthroughs. You would get a lot more ads and reviews of just everything across the board that's coming up. All different games on different platforms, different genres. These are the only places where you'd hear about some of the more obscure consoles. Nintendo Power or Xbox Magazine weren't going to tell you about thegame.com or the laser active. But something like, a Game Informer and EGM might. So these were great back in the day for folks that just really wanted to know what's coming out and what's worth getting. Because this is the pre-internet days, if some of you can imagine that such a thing existed. These magazines were my and many people's only chance to know what games are coming out. What should I go to the store to look for? And then when you're at the store and you see these games and you look at the box or you read the title, you're like, oh, that sounds kind of cool. You would look in these magazines to see what they said. Does the game play well? Is it reviewed well? Do people say good things about it? Or do the reviews come back and say, hey, it's basically a polished turd, you're going to hate yourself for buying it? Granted, that didn't happen often, because much like Kotaku and other game sites now that basically just accept money for good reviews, magazines were, of course, guilty of the same thing back in the day. Media hasn't changed that much, but you had a better shot of getting an idea of what something is. You could tell from the description if they're just trying to do a fluff piece or if they generally enjoyed it, because they get more or less detailed about what they enjoyed about the game. These magazines, even as collectibles now, it's really great to get these snapshots of, the history of the industry and see what people were really excited about and what games that we now love today flew under the radar when they first came out. It's also crazy, some of the ads you see in these old magazines. I know some have become memes and circulated the internet many times, like the one that I believe it was for Contra, where it shows the guy holding a joystick in a very specific way. I saw that ad in print when it first came out, before the internet was even a thing. And, at the time, none of us, we knew what they were hinting at, but it wasn't even that big a thing. We were honestly more interested in the game that it was advertising. So it's funny to see the attention it's gotten since then on the internet. But, it's fun to have those magazines to get that snapshot of how things used to be. Alright, and the last type of printed game-associated media that I should talk about is, of course, strategy guides. These are the most straightforward. You get the guide, it tells you how to play the game. These generally have detailed maps, descriptive walkthroughs. They'll show you where the Easter eggs and secrets are. Basically, it breaks down the whole game for you. Now, sometimes, like this one, they were unauthorized. These were generally put out by Prima or Brady Games. And these were just fans of the games that would get generally review copies or early access, or just get the copy day one and work day and night. They would put this guide together, whether scanning a screen or redrawing things or however they had to, and just immediately run it to print and get it in front of people and basically show them how to play the game. Because again, this is pre-internet. You couldn't Google how to beat a specific level or how to find this one secret weapon. Easter eggs were all word of mouth. There was no way to look up what secrets existed in a game. Player's guides were what you had to do. There were also official ones put out by Nintendo, or Sega, or these other companies, that were more, it was the same content. It was still an in-depth deep dive of the game. It still maps out all the areas. This Pokemon one, for example, has the whole Pokedex, shows you the moves the Pokemon can learn, what levels they evolve at, how they evolve, if it's one that needs a stone or to be traded or whatever. So it's the same type of thing, but it's official. It's put out by the company itself. It's not a third-party thing. The difference to the end user, which back in the day you would just call the reader, is non-existent. It's the same thing either way. Generally, you're just going to pay more if it's put out by Nintendo themselves. But yeah, these guides, generally these only have an audience with the people that care about that game. For example, you'll notice on my shelf here, I have some player's guides, but a lot of them are like, Pokemon, or Extreme G, there's StarCraft, GoldenEye, a couple Sonic games, there's Spyro over here, Mario. These are games that I specifically enjoy. I'm not going out and buying the player's guides for, say, Call of Duty, or the Madden games, or, if they had one for like a Dark Souls. Because I don't like those games, so I don't care about those guides. They mean nothing to me. They hold no value because I'm not going to play that game. So these are more specific with their audience, And that also means, a little bit of insider baseball here, they always made more guides than would sell. As someone that worked at various gaming retailers, players' guides were very hit or miss. Even if it was a really in-demand game that you knew a lot of people would want to play, not everyone cared enough to get the guide. Some people were just going to play the game passively. It's only the super fans that want to get these guides in 100%. Back before 100%ing a game was a thing. We're talking pre-achievements, pre-online leaderboards. So most game guides, and yeah, here's a perfect example. They would end up at your GameStop and EB Games and whatever other stores you buy video games from. After a while of not selling, the company would do this. Basically, they would penny it out, or reduce the price of the book to a penny. The store would then sell it to itself to get it out of stock, and then they would throw them away. This is one of the many reasons I'm glad I don't work at GameStop anymore. They're a horrible company. I hate that place more than anything. Trust me, they're the worst. You really should not support them. I know it's a meme to buy their stock. Don't. But, yeah, they would just chuck these all in the dumpster all the time. We threw away so many guides, as well as like t-shirts and belt buckles and hats and any of the stuff that would be an impulse buy that you would see like under the front counters you were cashing out. That stuff only had a couple weeks on the shelves. If it didn't sell, it was getting pennied out and it was getting chucked. The stuff we threw away would make you fume. But my point is, the player's guides always ended up in that pile. We always had some left over. We never sold them all. So, nowadays, when you see them out in the wilds, they generally go for more money than they honestly should. But also, it's very specific and very niche. People are only going to have strategy guides for games they like and care about. But, at the same time, that makes it more interesting in your collection because people can get a quick glimpse at, oh, what do you like? A lot of strategy and RPG and like platform action adventure type games. And just, it lets people quickly understand what you're the most interested in your collection. It's just a fun bit of, I don't really know how to describe it. It's just an interesting thing to have. And actually, on the note of game guides, one really fun, unique thing, if I can find it, there we go. Hand-drawn game guides. This is not an affiliated sponsorship or anything like that. I don't get money for anything on this channel. I don't have enough viewers to get money on this channel. But this guy, I believe his name is Phil, he went, and for some of the games that he's a fan of, he hand-drew the levels, the maps, the enemies, everything, and then started printing guides of just his hand drawings as the strategy guide. And originally it started with him doing Zelda. I think he did a Castlevania one, or was going to, and then got shut down by Nintendo because Nintendo sucks. But eventually he got a partnership with Capcom, this is licensed, where they hired him to make this guide. And it went swimmingly. He produced it, and he's probably going to produce more. So, it's a cool thing. If you care about old 2D NES games, specifically Capcom ones, and you want to support indie artists, buy this book if you can still find it, and when he crowdfunds or does whatever he's going to do for the next books, go buy them. It's a cool thing to have out in the world. We should support that when we can. Yeah. I want to say, too, on the topic of these guides, the other thing that you don't understand about, what they provide, because again, we live in an internet world. In the pre-internet era, when a game wasn't out yet, if the guide came out first, it's going to sound weird, but it almost lets you play the game without having the game. I sincerely hope I'm not alone in this, but I would get these guides sometimes for a game that was coming out to see what it looked like and how it was going to play so I could tell if I was really excited or not. And I would basically trace the path through the levels with my finger in the guide, just like in the car or sitting at home, just to play it before playing it. I don't know, it was just a really cool way to get some insight into the game as a kid. I didn't think that I was gaining insight. I'm just like, oh, I'm excited for this game. Look, this level works like this. It's, I don't know, maybe my mom just ate a lot of Tylenol. But speaking of collectible-obsessed completionist autists, these are the things that companies like Limited Run Games or Strictly Limited Games or all the other companies with a three-letter initialism would charge you almost double the price to have included with your game. The first would be steelbooks. These, honestly, are pretty obvious with the function they serve. And by that I mean there isn't one. They basically exist to sit on your shelf and look pretty. They take up the same amount of space as a normal case would. You know, they're not any different in size. They don't provide any other benefit that way. The only real benefit you gain from the steelbooks is they look pretty. You know, it's the same amount of protection, same amount of space on the shelf, but they just look really cool. And that's not a knock, by the way. You know, if you want to pay extra to have something that looks awesome, you should, and I won't fault you for it, because they do look awesome. I like the way they look, too. You know, a lot of them have really cool art. Some of them are textured, like this one, where this enemy is, like, it protrudes from the case. It's elevated, it's raised, whatever you want to call it. These things just look cool. You know, they're fun to have, they feel good. I like any kind of collectible or media or anything that just gives you that good tactile satisfaction. You know, something that's just fun to hold, fun to touch, that just, it feels good. And steelbooks, I would say, fit that bill. And on that note, honestly, if something looking cool or just being perceived as cool is the only reason you have for buying it, that's enough of a reason to justify it. You don't have to go further than that. It's your collection, it's your money, you can decide what is or is not worth getting. If you think it looks cool and would make a fun addition, great. You don't have to justify it further than that. Go for it. But those aren't the only useless and cool-looking metal things that you can buy for your collection, because there's also these coins. Not the crypto kind, boys and girls. Sometimes coins are just coins. But like I said, these are useless. They serve no purpose. Let me get them closer. They're just metal coins. But again, they're very tactile, they're fun to hold, they have some heft to them, they're solidly made, they look and feel cool, and you know, I dig them. They're unique and they're fun to hold, and I just like the way it feels. And hey, at the end of the day, everything in life doesn't have to serve a purpose. You know, sometimes the purpose can just be something you like. You know, like, these are coins that I actually commissioned. They're metal challenge coins styled to look like the various cups in Mario Kart 8. They don't serve a purpose. They don't do anything. I don't gain anything by having these. They don't interact with a game. They're not transferable for any reason. They're not worth anything. They're just cool and fun, and they're unique, especially these ones because I had them made, so not many other people, aside from my best friend, who I also had a set made for, will have these. And that's fine. They're a cool thing, and I like having cool things, so here they are. And the last of the useless physical goodies that you can collect just for the sake of collecting, that would be trading cards. Now, some games come with trading cards specific to that game in them. And those generally, you know, they are trading cards in that you could trade them with other people, but you're only going to get the one unless you buy multiple copies of that same game to try to get the rest. So the majority of people won't have a full collection unless you get, you know, super collectors like me who will go out, or who would go out and, like, buy every other card in the set. For those of you that buy games on Steam nowadays, you're familiar with the concept because you can earn trading cards in Steam, then you can trade them on the little online marketplace thing. You get how it works. But the other great example is limited run games. They don't do them anymore, but for the longest time, when you bought a game on LRG, you would get a trading card of some sort that would accompany the game and generally relate to the game. You know, you have ones for Worms, Maniac Mansion, you know, all the various games would have these trading cards. And every time you bought a game, you'd get another card. At the end of the day, you have giant stacks of them that you can then, theoretically, trade with other people, hence the name. There are people that would try to get a full set of these. You know, I have multiple of these boxes and then a few more piles lying around of all these cards, and I don't even have a full set. But there are some people that have, you know, multiple binders of every card for every game that LRG has released, all because they're numbered, so they have them all in order, all the cards, it's a whole thing. Some people pay good money for them. Those people are ridiculous, but that's only my opinion. And let me say that too. This whole thing is an opinion piece. If you disagree with me on any of this, that's great, that's fine. Go ahead. You know, if you don't see the value in the specific collectible I'm talking about, great, don't collect that thing. I'm just throwing ideas for collectors of things they can do and add to their collection that aren't just necessarily more games. And while the critics do exist that would say that a lot of these collectibles are pointless, especially like trading cards, they're just colorful cardboard, they don't do anything. I think Pokemon scalpers specifically recently have taught us that colorful cardboard can be worth a lot. And I don't have any weird tortured pun or clever transition, so... Okay, so this is something I feel very passionate about. I think I've made it clear on this channel that in addition to loving games and horror movies, I'm also a huge music fan. And game music is in no way an exception to that. Some game music is so good and so iconic that people will get into a game or a series of games more for the music than the game itself. Also, there was a game going around for a while online, not a real game, like a TikTok trend game, where music from certain video game franchises was so well composed and arranged that people would play excerpts of it, as well as excerpts of classical music, like Bach or Beethoven, and then have an unfamiliar listener try to tell which was the classical composition and which was from a video game. And they didn't always get them all right, because the music really is that good.
I'd have a guess, but I'm only like 30% confident, maybe.
And so obviously, with game music being just as incredible as it is, there are people out there that would collect soundtracks. And being an audiophile myself, I am absolutely one of those people. I have stacks, not literally because you don't store music stacked, of CDs and Blu-rays and vinyls of just soundtracks from all kinds of different games, because I just absolutely love it. And I guess I should start with CDs, because they are just the most convenient for most people. They don't take up a lot of space. Like, if you look, that's how much space these soundtracks would take up on a shelf. There's a bunch here that you don't need a lot to store them. And they're also not super expensive to produce. Not that you'd know that from how much companies like Limited Run will tack onto the price to include one of these bad boys, but realistically, they cost next to nothing to make. And honestly, some people may have started collecting these soundtrack CDs, not even on purpose, just because they used to get packed in with games all the time. It used to be the case where if you bought a game, especially if you pre-ordered it, getting the soundtrack on CD with the game was just part of buying the game. I remember, for example, there was an old school dungeon crawler RPG released for the DS called The Dark Spire. It reminds me of early adventure games like a Shadowgate mixed with Swords and Serpents for the NES. And that's right up my alley. That's totally my vibe. It even has the classic wireframe early 2D drawn in MS Paint kind of animations. And I don't know, this game spoke to me. It was one I needed to have, and I knew that the instant I saw information about it in a game magazine. And so I pre-ordered it. Well, because I pre-ordered, the soundtrack just came in the box with the game. It's why it's in this fancy cardboard and not just a standard DS case. Because there was a soundtrack disc inside this box as well. I didn't pay for that. It wasn't extra. But because I pre-ordered the game, I just got it. And this was the norm for a lot of games. There were tons of stuff on, that's terrible grammar, on the PS2, the GameCube, Xbox. I think even going back further than that, I think as early as the Super Nintendo, you would find game soundtrack CDs included with the game sometimes, just as a fun thing to have. So these are something that a lot of people might not have even collected on purpose, they just ended up with. Vinyls, however, a little bit of a different beast. These are something you have to go out of your way to buy. They're definitely more expensive to produce and collect. I'm not going to argue over the sound differences of CD and vinyl. For the general layperson, you don't care, you're not going to notice, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to get into that. The big difference for me, and I chose the wrong example of vinyl to show you, is that Again, it just comes down to a tactile difference. You know, vinyls, not this one specifically, but many vinyls come in what's called a gatefold, where I will simulate it, where basically you have your records, and instead of just sliding them out of the side like these ones do, you have your gatefold case, which means this is the front album art. You open it, and there's art in the middle, usually like a picture of the band, if it's something done by a band, as well as the track listing, maybe a lyric sheet, something like that. And then on the back of the gatefold would be additional art. Something like that, a CD or any other form of media just doesn't compare. You know, something about touching it and holding it and just having all the artwork and the visuals be a part of it, it's just a delight. It makes vinyl superior for that reason. So if you're someone that really likes the music and you like the soundtracks and you want just that extra really cool feel, the vinyls are worth it just for that experience, in my opinion at least. Again, this is all opinion. But, and I will say but, they are pricier. So again, if you're just a person that likes the music and wants to hear it, go with CDs, you know. You're going to get the same soundtrack, it's just going to cost significantly less. CD is generally $5 to $10. Vinyls can be upwards of 50, sometimes even 100, depending on the length, the amount of records included, etc. Also, too, this whole time I've been talking about soundtracks, when there is also ample like remix albums, or rearrangements, or covers, or all kinds of things. There's an entire label, and again, not affiliated, not sponsored. This is an unprompted promotion of things that I appreciate. But there is a label, Game Chops, started by DJ Cutman, where just a ton of people that do video game remixes will put out, why did I emphasize that word that way, will put out entire albums of remixes. Either it will be like a mixtape of a bunch of different songs from different games, all remixed in a style or various styles. Other times it will have a theme to it, like they will all be Zelda remixes, or maybe it'll be from different games, but they'll all be jazz or lo-fi or whatever. A lot of that stuff exists. You know, you don't always just have to listen to the game music as it would be in the game. A lot of people have taken it a step further. You know, I have albums from a string quartet that has taken this video game music and made it, you know, almost orchestral. I have lo-fi mixes, dubstep albums, and just everything in between. There are songs that have been rapped over, where the backing track is video game music. Hellbound, an early single by Eminem, actually features the spoken intro and the music from Soul Calibur as the backing track of the rap. You know, game music is out there on all media, and people should definitely have it. And actually, on the topic of remix albums, to kind of bring everything full circle, this is a remix album. This is a bunch of chiptune remixes of various songs from the Zelda franchise released as an album. However, as you may have noticed, this is an NES cartridge. This is not a clever case holding a CD that looks like an NES cart. This is an actual honest-to-God NES cartridge. You put it in your console, it turns on like a game, and you play it. But instead of a game, what you find when you turn this on is a small built-in media player where you can select various songs from various different Zelda games and play them through your TV via your NES hardware. And it's a fun, unique thing. And this is not the only one. There are many of these for many different games or franchises. I have one for, I believe it's called A Whole New World. It was a PS4 game where you could get the soundtrack on the NES cart. Many other ones exist as well. But, you know, it lets you just experience the music through your cartridge to bring the love of the game music back to the game console. Yeah, it's just... A lot of people love the music, and there are a lot of physical media ways to show that love and support those musicians and just listen to and appreciate the sounds of the games. But if you want to go a step further and really feel connected to the games that you love, Okay, so I realize now that that transition sounded like I was pitching sex toys to furries. I'm like 98% sure that was not my intent. But no, plushies, or stuffed animals, whatever you call them, are just fun to have. They're cute, and who doesn't like having cute things? If you're so inclined, you can snuggle them, which is always great. If you're on the more destructive side, they would make great chew toys for your dog or ferret. Hell, if you're someone who would impulse buy a $1,500 claw machine, plushies make great fillers for said claw machine. There's ample reasons to have these. Also, I'm going to go on a little tangent here, because I've seen this talked about many times. Adults can own plushies, okay? Can we just agree on that? Like, it's okay to have things in your life that just make you feel comfortable or just bring you joy because they exist. If you want to have cute things that are silly or childish, but they make you happy, just have them. It's fine. You don't need permission. People don't need to judge anyone for that. Like, it's okay. Just have those things. The amount of times I've been on Reddit and I've seen someone who's in their late teens or 20s or even 30s asking, hey, is it okay for me to have a stuffed animal? I just got a new girlfriend. Is she going to be weirded out when she sees a stuffed animal on my bed? Like, guys, it's okay. Just have stuffed animals. It's fine. But anyway, tangent over. Back to the topic at hand. Plushies are actually a great collectible for games. For one, they're very colorful and eye-catching. In the frame that you're looking at right now, granted they caught your eye because they're basically the only thing in the frame aside from me and this very bright lamp, but also they're just eye-catching. They're designed that way on purpose. They're made to be cutesy and colorful, and they really stick out. And that goes hand in hand with video games that often have very cutesy, colorful, cartoony, mascot-like characters, Think of, like, your Pokemon, which is overrepresented here. But also, Animal Crossing and Shantae, and I pointed to this when I said Animal Crossing, even though it's from Harvest Moon. All these different things represent different games, and it's just similar to what I was saying about the guides earlier. It's a very quick and easy way to show people what your interests are as far as your collection is concerned by having these stuffed animals. Looking at this, you would know right away, oh, that's someone who's a fan of cozy games, and also, monster capture games or RPGs or just Pokemon specifically. And also, if you'll forgive yet another unsponsored little unprompted promotion, there are a few up here, specifically the Dragonair on the far side and Fidget here from Dust and Elysian Tale, one of the best games ever, by the way. These were handmade and commissioned. I got these from someone I met while on a trip to Salem. Keiki Crafts is the name of the company, and this lovely lady, Chelsea, very nice, friendly person. She hand makes these. She custom made the ones that I asked for what I thought was actually a fairly reasonable price, and they came out looking really good. You might think this one in particular is somewhat ugly. It's supposed to be. If you've ever played the game, they actually acknowledge stuffed animals of Fidget in the game being kind of ugly, so it's very on brand. It looks perfect in my opinion. So I just wanted to promote her and her little company and her way of making money. If you ever want stuffed animals that you can't find, you can order them from her. I will link in the description. Just quick shout out there. She does great work. I want to promote that because she's awesome. If you do buy stuff from her, tell her I sent you, because then maybe next time I order stuffed animals from her, she'll give me a discount. Also, I'm not going to take it down, but the Dragonair plush she made is pretty big. Not quite as long as that Chill It plush, I will say. Extra bonus point for Pale World there. But still, pretty big for a plush. And actually, on the topic of Pokemon. Now your first thought may have been Amiibos or Funkos. And yes, technically those are collectible figures. That is not what I mean. What I mean, things like these guys. McDonald's toy figures. And it doesn't have to be McDonald's toys. There's also pre-orders like Secret Agent Clank, or the Overwatch figure, the World of Warcraft figures. There are other ways to get these figures. But mostly what I mean is the non-functional, which one would argue all Amiibos are non-functional, just fun, collectible, decorative figures. These are things that they just look really cool or cute on a shelf. They're just fun to have. They really kind of liven a space up. And I think that's actually the main appeal here. This is the wrong shelf to demonstrate it with, but if you've ever watched a lot of collection tour videos of people, even like the Angry Video Game Nerd or Pat the NES Punk or any of those guys, and I know those are very old examples, but if you look at someone that has a massive collection and they tour you through the collection, it's not usually just a wall of games. I said like I didn't spend the first half of this video in front of a literal wall of games. Usually there's extra stuff on that wall, Somewhere in between the games will be like a special edition box or a game turned sideways. You get the whole front art. Or they'll have little figures on the shelf in front of the games or on top of the games. They'll have, just a little shadow box, something like that. Like, these kinds of things draw your eye. They stand out and they draw attention to a specific spot in your collection. If one of the pride of joys of your collection is, let's say you have a sealed copy of Pokemon Soul Silver, it's not the rarest thing in the world, but it's kind of cool. You don't see that game all the time, especially not complete in box, especially not sealed. I see it all the time. I have one right over there. Why I use that example. But most people don't. So if you do and you want to draw even more attention to it, you would put that on a shelf and then surround it by some of these figures. So now people aren't just seeing another game box in an endless sea of game boxes. They're going to see this specific game box surrounded by shiny, colorful plastic. It draws the eye. It makes things feel a little more lively, a little more interesting. And actually, on the topic of keeping things kind of unique, now, I've spent a lot of this video talking about what different types of collectibles are. So I guess let me take a step back. I want to go through the why. Like I said at the very top of the video, a lot of game collectors have big collections of games and consoles, and they might have unique controllers, stuff like that. But it's things that you can see everywhere. Even the rarer stuff is still stuff you'll see in other collections. I mean, even my rarest things, the NES prototypes that I have, no one else has those specific prototypes, but I know for a fact plenty of other collectors do have prototype cards. There's been dozens of them that I've bid on in the past that I didn't win. So those dozen or so all belong to other collections right now. Pretty much any game or console you can think of, no matter how rare, aside from the Nintendo PlayStation, which there's only one of, other people have as well. They're not unique, so they're not inherently interesting. So to set your collection apart from other people, you want to have these extra collectibles, just this extra little thing that makes your collection different. I can't even tell you, honestly, how many people have been in this room for the first time and they see all the games and they're awestruck for a moment, but then the first thing they really comment on is the shadow box of enamel pins that is off camera, so I'm pointing to nothing, but it's there. Or, the custom Pokeball with the Charizard in it, a whole little, terrain featured around him. It would be the Luigi hat, or all the figures, and the posters, These are the things that people notice, because that's unique, that's different. Those are things that you don't see in every collection, and certainly not to the everyday person who isn't, collecting such a massive thing like this, To someone that just has a few games under the TV in their living room, a collection like this is crazy enough, but to have all the ephemera and miscellaneous stuff with it really sets it apart and makes it not just more games, it makes it a collection. And now I want to, go over the really, really unique things. All the stuff I mentioned is cool, it does stand out, it is unique, but I want to talk about the one-offs, the conversation starters, the things that you don't even really think about, you just sometimes maybe happen across, and they just become cool living parts of your collection. Which is why I'm standing here, because this would be my first example. This is an actual vinyl piece of side art for the Space Ace arcade game. If you're unfamiliar, the game was created by Don Bluth, the same guy who animated All Dogs Go to Heaven and Five Goes West, as well as the rest of the American Tail movies, and a bunch of other early animated movies that Any of the younger people in the audience don't even know what I'm talking about. But he also made this video game and a few others, like Dragon Lair. And this specific piece of side art is one in a series of 30 that were made individually numbered. This one here is number 25. I don't know if you can see that on camera. But it is signed by Don Bluth and the guy who voiced the main character in the game. And it's just a really fun, unique thing. There's only 30 sets of these. So assuming none were ever lost or destroyed, only 29 other people have this. So again, they are in other collections, but not many. And certainly not many that people I know have seen. So it's a really fun, unique thing to have, and this will definitely start a conversation. Likewise, this is an animation cell from, and I had a friend help me actually look this up and find this specific frame in the animation. If I can find it again, I'll edit it in here.
Now, on your breakfast table, Donkey Kong brand cereal.
Okay, I pantomimed enough, so I'm going to assume it was edited in, or I couldn't find it and just silently pantomimed for 3 seconds. But this was from a commercial for the Donkey Kong cereal. On the back, there's even, certificate of authenticity, describing what it is, and saying that it is the thing that it is. There's also a spider web on here, which is kind of gross. But yeah, this is another thing, super unique, super fun. And, people ask about it, and they want to see it, and they're curious. And it's just fun to talk about and show off, because this is the kind of thing you never see. If I show you my copy of Chrono Trigger, you're going to say, oh, that's a cool game. Or, you must like the RPGs on the Super Nintendo. That's it. That's a whole conversation. If I show them this, there's a lot of stuff to talk about. Like, oh, what's that from? How'd you get that? How did you, can you find the commercial or show that it was from? Are there more of these? How many of these animation cells did it take to make that commercial? There's a lot more discussion to be had, because it's more unique and interesting. And let me make it clear, too, that not everything has to be a very expensive or rare kind of thing. This is an NES. NES consoles, and this one's broken, by the way, super cheap to get. I think this specific one cost me like $5. The reason I got it is because I was at the Too Many Games game convention, and at one point I saw a guy walking around in Professor Oak cosplay. Weird character to cosplay as. I wouldn't think I'd see him. And then I heard him talk to somebody, and I recognized his voice immediately, because he wasn't in cosplay, he was Professor Oak. It was Stuart Zagnut, the guy who voiced Professor Oak in the Pokemon anime. So, I went to the nearest booth to me, I got something that had a big surface I could have him sign in NES, and then I ran over and had him sign it. I eventually got a picture with him too. I'll put that on the screen. And then I decided, well, hey, if I already got him to sign it, why not walk around this convention and get everyone else to sign it too? So I did. DJ Cutman, who was doing the music for the whole convention, and like I said, would later go on to found Game Chop's music label. Brental Floss, who does video game music parodies. The Angry Video Game Nerd, as well as Mike Matei and Kyle Mustin, or Justin, I don't know. But they do the theme song and a lot of the art for the Angry Video Game Nerd channel. They all signed it as well. It's just a fun thing I have that cost me like $5, and then I just walked up to these people and have scrolled their names on it. It's an easy thing to do. It cost me next to nothing, but it's a really fun, unique thing to have in a collection. It's fun just to show people, like, hey, I have this thing, and then they ask, oh, who are these signatures? Where'd you meet them? Blah, blah, blah. It's just a good conversation starter. And look, like I alluded to, it's a lot of it's just about having more to say about your collection. If you're serious about starting a game collection, at least a big one, kind of like mine, or some of the people that have bigger ones, because those do exist, you will have one of two conversations 99% of the time when someone walks into the room and sees your collection. They will either take the semi-snarky route and kind of belittle your collection by saying, oh, have you played all of these? Or they'll at least feign interest if they don't genuinely have interest and say, wow, which game's your favorite? That's it. Those are the only two conversations that will start naturally when people see your collection. That's all. Trust me, 35 years of collecting, those are the only conversations that will start. That's it. Those two. I've had those two conversations 9 million times. That is not exaggeration. That's the literal freaking number. 9 million times. It never ends. And now that I've said that, if people watch this video, the comment section is going to be a laundry list of, well, have you played all your games, or which game is your favorite? Just, that's it. So, if you get these collectibles, it lets you have more conversations. It lets you talk about something. When someone sees this, and then they see the signatures, they have more stuff they can ask about. You don't see this and say, oh, have you played this side art? Or, oh, which of these two signatures is your favorite? You know, it's, oh, what's this from? I don't know this game. Or who are these names? Who signed this? What is this for? Is this worth something? Why do you have this framed? Like, there's more there. And then when you answer those questions, they'll ask more questions. They'll follow up. They'll want to be more informed on the subject. You've just started an actual, literal conversation. Also, the other reason to collect this stuff, and the main reason I wanted to make this video, because, you know, I don't know if you know this, the economy's kind of shit. It doesn't even really matter when you're watching this video. The economy's always shit. But, it's, you know, all the stuff I mentioned in this video is really cheap. The most expensive of all the collectibles I've mentioned, at least when I acquired them, like this, you know, I just got from someone who restored old arcade machines. I gutted a cabinet to build a MAME cabinet, and I gave him the boards and all the stuff that was inside it, as well as other miscellaneous arcade parts and boards that I had lying around. I gave that all to him, and in exchange, he gave me this for free. It would cost you more if you were to buy it, but the point is, you know, a lot of collectibles you can come across naturally, you can get cheap or free. They will cost less than the actual games in your collection. If you go over everything I showed you today, the most expensive thing for me was the 2 custom plushes that I had commissioned. And even those, combined, the 2 of them put together, are less than pretty much every game for the Neo Geo AES or the Pioneer Laser Active. Hell, if you took everything I covered in this video and combined them all and put the value together, that's still cheaper than my Panasonic Q. Like, these collectibles, they're not going to set you back much. So if you're building a collection on a budget, and you, like, obviously you want to focus on games to start out because that's the point. You want to play and collect the games. But once you get it to the point where it stops being a pile of games and starts being a collection, if you want to fill out the collection and make it more interesting and more fun for other people to see and enjoy and talk about, these kinds of collectibles are easily the best and cheapest way to do that. You know, you're going to get the most bang for your buck buying the Sea of Thieves bookends, or, you know, the Last Crusade poster. Last Crusade, it's Last Remnant. Last Crusade is Indiana Jones movie. But, like, these things are more interesting for other people to see, and honestly, they make the collection in the room feel good for you. You know, when I sit in this room, sometimes I don't even play a game right away. I like to just sit and kind of take it in and just enjoy the ambiance, because when I look around, I see all this stuff. Let me, behind the scenes here, you know, you see the shelf with all the figures. And then over here, where you see the Switch games, there's all kinds of figures on top of them. There's posters above them. Over there, you see the TV and the cord mess. Ignore that. But next to it, you see all the magazines and the Skylanders on the shelves. Right here in the middle of the room, there's all kinds of ephemera with little game guides and mini strat guides and tiny collectibles and figures. And it's just, it's really fun to have these things in the room, because it makes the collection feel more alive and more used and more lifeful. That's not a word, but I think you know what I mean. And honestly, that's basically it. You know, I just wanted to make this video to kind of give folks an idea of how to flesh out their collection and make it more interesting or unique or special to them without breaking the bank and just adding never-ending piles of games to their already growing pile. So hopefully this helped. And, you know, if it did, and you find yourself building out your collection a little, make a collection tour video. Send it to me. I would genuinely love to watch it. I like seeing other people's collections and what they do and how they set things up and what pieces they have that they're proud of. So yeah, do that. Shoot it over. Leave a comment. Do whatever. I like being interactive. I have no one comments on these videos, so if you do, I will read it and reply. And yeah, I think that's about it. Shout out again to all the people I mentioned in the video. Game Chops and Cakey Crafts that did the cool plushes. I'll put links in the thing because, I don't know, I want to support people that do cool shit. And yeah, I think that's it. I'm going to stop talking now because I started filming this at 9:30 at night like a terribly irresponsible person, and it's getting late and I have to go walk my dog. So, see ya!